All right, so this is worksheet 10.4, solving by quadratic formula. And at first, quadratic formula looks kind of complicated and can kind of scare you, but it really is one of the easier things that we can do. With each of these problems, the very first thing you do is you make sure you're equal to 0, which I was nice and I made sure all of these were. If you weren't, you'd have to get that to be true. And then once you do that, what you're going to do is look at these numbers that are in front of these terms. So we would say that a equals 1, because it's 1 in front of x squared, b equals 8, and c equals 15. So you just pull the three numbers off. That's your a, b, and c. And then all you're going to do is put those numbers into these spots. So the first thing it says is take the opposite of b. The opposite of 8 is negative 8. So x equals the opposite of 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So 8 squared, 8 times 8 is 64. I would recommend that you just do that on your own in your head. It saves you a little problem if you try to do it on a calculator. Minus 4 times 1 times 15. And that's all over 2 times a. So 2 times 1 is 2. Okay? And then that's going to get you something. And then what we want you to do is just take a calculator and type this in. Just go 64 minus 4 times 1 times 15. Just type it all at once. Don't try to do it in pieces. And then tell me what you got. So for this one, 64 minus 4 times 1 times 15 is 4. All right? And we get to there. Now, sometimes this will be it. If that square root doesn't simplify, I'm not going to have you go any further. I'm going to have you just stop, and that'll be your answer. In this particular case, we can go further because the square root of 4 is 2. So we know that this would be negative 8 plus or minus 2 divided by 2. And then we're just going to ask you to go ahead and do the last step. So we're going to go negative 8 plus 2. That's negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So I'm going to do the adding up top first and then divide by 2. Negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So we end up with x equal to negative 3 or negative 5. Okay. Now you could have gotten that by factoring. If we would have factored up here, it would have been x plus 3, x plus 5, because 3 times 5 is 15 and 3 plus 5 is 8. And then you would have said, okay, this is 0 when x is negative 3, and this is 0 when x is negative 5. Certainly that is a quicker way to do this problem. The beauty of quadratic formula is that it works on everything. It doesn't matter whether it's set up nicely, whether it factors like this, or if you have a nice even number for completing the square in the middle or anything like that. The quadratic formula will be the same steps every time, no matter how difficult your equation is. So over here, we have a equal 1, b equals negative 7, c equals 13. So I'm going to go opposite of b. The opposite of negative 7 is 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. This number will always be positive. So don't put it in a calculator and accidentally get a negative there. It's not how it works. All right? Minus 4 times 1 times 13 over 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay? Then again, take your calculator and go 49 minus 4 times 1 times 13 all at once, and you should get a negative 3 for that. Okay? Now, we can't take the square root of a negative number. There is no number times itself that would give you negative 3. So when you get to this, something like this, we're going to write no solution. All right? There isn't anything x can equal to make this original thing equal 0. Later on next week when we graph it, what you're going to see is that this graph kind of looks like this, and it never hits the x-axis. There's no time that this equals 0. Versus over here, when we graph this one, what you're going to see is that it hits the x-axis at negative 5 and at negative 3. And those were your solutions. So there's going to be a connection between your answers and where it hits the x-axis. Again, next week we'll get into more of that. Let me show you these two real quick. So here's A is 2, B is 5, C is negative 4. So it's the opposite of B, plus or minus the square root of b squared. 5 times 5 is 25, minus 4 times 2 times negative 4 over 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay? So that means x equals -5 plus or minus the square root. If I go 25 minus 4 times 2 times -4 on my calculator, I'm going to get 37 for an answer over 4. Let me do that again. No, not 37. 832, I'm going to get 57. Okay? And then square root of 57 does not work out nice and neatly, and so there's no reason to make it more complicated. We're going to just stop right there. That is our answer then. All right? And so on your quiz, it'll be multiple choice. On your test, it'll have some multiple choice, and you just pick this answer. So it's really just a question of, can you pick the right numbers? Can you put them in and do that one little calculation? If you can do those things correctly, then you'll be all set. All right, last one here. A equals 3, B is -1, C is -4. So the opposite of B, plus or minus the square root. -1 times -1 is 1, minus 4 times 3 times -4, all over 2 times 3, which is 6. So again, pick the numbers off. That's easy. Plug them in. Not too bad once you do it a couple times. And then the last thing you're going to do is put this on your calculator. So 1 minus 4 times 3 times -4 will give you 49 all over 6. Now, again, the square root of 49 is something we can do, so we would ask you to keep going here. Square root of 49 is 7. And so we're going to get 1 plus 7, that's 8. 8 divided by 6 is 8/6, or 4/3, or 1 1/3, or 1.3 repeating. You can really say it any way, which way you want there. 1 minus 7 is -6. -6 divided by 6 is a -1. So, again, all these you can see it's the same steps, kind of 3 steps. What's the ABC? Plug them into the formula, simplify. You may have to go one more step if that square root simplifies nicely. Otherwise, you can just leave it. And if it's a negative, we're going to write no solution.